Hi, welcome to Robot Culture. I'm your host, Kevin Isley. Today, we're going to talk about the Greg LeMond effect. Greg LeMond, born June 26, 1961 in Lakewood, California. His family later moved them to Washoe Valley, Nevada, an unincorporated area between Reno and Carson City. Greg didn't start off as a cyclist. He began his sports career as a ski racer. And in 1975, he met Wayne Wong, a freestyle skiing pioneer who suggested to Greg that he start up road cycling as a way to stay in shape for skiing. In 1976, Greg LeMond started competing in bike racing. He won his first 11 events in the 13 to 15-year-old category, and it was with this domination of the sport that they moved him up to the 16 to 19-year-old category. That year, he came in second of the Tour of Fresno, only behind John Howard, who was the best American cyclist at the time. In 1978, he placed 9th in the Junior World Championship race in Washington, D.C. In 1979, he won the gold, silver, and bronze medals of the Junior World Championship race in Argentina. After those victories, he was selected for the 1980 Olympics U.S. cycling team, but the U.S. boycotted those Olympics in Moscow, so he never competed in the Olympics. In 1980, he was selected for the U.S. national team, and he went to Europe to race for 6 weeks. It was there that he won the Circuit de la Sarthe. He was the first American and the youngest rider of any nationality to win a major Pro-Am cycling event. This put Greg on the map. In 1981, he signed his first pro contract with Team Renault. And in 1982, he broke his collarbone and had to scale back his training and his racing season. And in 1984, Greg LeMond competed in his first Tour de France, and he won the white jersey for Best Young Rider. And then in 1985, he was signed with Team La Vie Claire to support Bernard Hinault. This was a major pro signing for an American. In 1986, Greg LeMond won his first Tour de France, becoming the first American to win the Tour de France. This race is considered by many to be the greatest single Tour de France race in history. The drama that unfolded between him and Bernard Hinault is something of legend, and it is such a compelling story that it inspired the documentary Slaying the Badger. If you haven't seen this documentary, you have to. If you like cycling and you like everything cycling, this is the documentary for you. Then in 1987, when everything was looking up for Greg LeMond, he was accidentally shot in the chest while hunting. This sidelined Greg LeMond for 2 years. But when he came back in 1989 into the Tour de France, he won it for a second time. He is now a 2-time Tour de France winner, first American in history to do such, and it was an amazing race. This put him on the cover of Sports Illustrated. He was the first cyclist to ever make the cover of Sports Illustrated. He was called Sportsman of the Year. Then in 1990, Greg LeMond won his third and final Tour de France victory. This set him on a stage of very few cyclists. This is a premier club for any major racer. Then in 1991, he placed 7th in the Tour. 92 and 93, he did not place anywhere near the top, and then in 1994 he abandoned the Tour after the first week. And then in December of 1994 he retired from the sport of cycling. He later said that he had to retire from the sport because the gunshot pellets that were still in his chest were causing inflammation every time he trained and every time he raced. So every race he did after he got shot was detrimental to his health. Greg LeMond had a career of firsts. He was the first cyclist to use aero bars in the Tour de France. He was the first cyclist to win the Tour de France on a carbon frame bike. He was the first cyclist to sign a $1 million contract, and he was the first cyclist to sign a $5+ million contract. He was the first American to win the Road Race World Championships, and he did it twice, 1983 and 1989. He started a bicycle company called LeMond Bicycles, which had a partnership with Trek. And in 2001, Greg LeMond came out and said, Lance Armstrong is doping. This soured his relationship with Lance Armstrong's title sponsor, Trek, and they dissolved their relationship in 2008, and there were no more LeMond bicycles. Then the LeMond brand was brought back to life in 2013 thanks to a partnership with Time Sports International. So in the end, what is the Greg LeMond effect? Well, on a personal level, and perhaps the greatest effect in my book, he inspired me as a kid. I grew up in Reno, Nevada, and as a child, I raced BMX bikes and I was an avid skier. When I turned 13 years old, I made it onto the Mount Rose ski team, and our coach told us to take up road cycling as a way to stay in shape. So in the summers, I would race bikes, but unlike Greg LeMond, I did not dominate the sport. I usually got dominated. I was always a better skier as a kid. I went to Worcester High School, so did Greg LeMond, and when I was training for my rides and just out having a good time, I would go by bike shops and say, do you know any routes that Greg LeMond took? And they would tell me some routes, and I would go home and I would map them out and I would go ride them with my map in my back pocket. It was so inspiring for me to have somebody like Greg LeMond, the greatest American cyclist, have gone to my high school, lived in my area, and trained on my roads. Greg LeMond is the greatest American cyclist in history. Well, I think that just about covers it. The Greg LeMond effect and a little bit of history about me. If you like this episode, give it a thumbs up. If you're new to my channel, hit that subscribe button. And as always, I'm on Instagram, I'm on YouTube, I'm on Facebook. I'm everywhere. And until the next time, I hope to see you out there on the road.
Is it possible to ride day in and day out? I think they're, what, 2 days off during the event? And to do stages of 120 miles plus and not take some sort of substance?
Of course, yes. I want it clean.